Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher.
If blacks vote in great numbers, progressive whites win. It's the only way progressive whites win. If blacks vote in great numbers, Hispanics win. When blacks, Hispanics, and progressive whites vote, women win. When women win, children win. When women and children win, workers win. We must all come up together. We must come up together.
Tonight we pause to remember the life and legacy of the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, a man whose name became synonymous with the fight for justice, equality, and human dignity. From the marches of the civil rights movement to the halls of power, he carried forward a mission rooted in service, activism, and the belief that every voice matters. For the next 45 minutes, we reflect on the lessons he leaves behind, the causes he championed, and the impact he had on generations of leaders around the world and everyday people. We are joined by a powerful group of guests who stood behind him and beside him, marched with him, learned from him as we remember Jesse Jackson and his lifelong commitment to justice. We begin with Dr. Greg Carr, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Howard University, and the Reverend Mark Thompson, political, civil, and human rights activist and protege of Reverend Jackson. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this really important conversation. And even as we send our loving condolences to the Jackson family, let me first start with you, Reverend Thompson. When you first heard of Reverend Jackson's passing, what was your first thought? What was your first memory?
Well, first of all, thank you, Harold, for having me, and thank you. It's always good to be on WHUR and the Daily Drum. I was blessed to have spent a portion of the holiday season with Reverend Jackson. Knowing his condition, but he rallied. You know, I was surprised. I did not expect him. We had gotten a call, I guess late October, early November, that he had taken a turn for the worse and that his demise was imminent, but that was a rumor greatly exaggerated. He rallied. I was able to spend some time with him, and in his characteristic fashion, when I got to Chicago, Greg, he wanted me to break him out of the hospital. But when I got the word in the wee hours of this morning, I first felt a sense of triumph, because we know where he is and we know where he went and we know he's with God and we know the contribution he made. We had seen him in his condition. And so sometimes it's a relief when a loved one is suffering no more. But then the calls started coming in. Mark, I know how close you all were. Mark, he was your mentor. Mark, you know, he loved you. You all did so much together. And the waterworks have been going ever since then, because that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments, you don't think about everything. But you've got friends and loved ones who call and remind you, even from Nashville, Greg. And so it has begun to weigh very heavily on me that he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be this period of mourning, but ultimately we must find ourselves in the place we're supposed to be as African people, that our ancestors don't die. In Christianity, we say they live forever with Christ. In the truest African tradition, even before Christianity, our ancestors live on. European time is linear, African time is circular. And so we not only will see him again, we can call upon him now. The disciples had that African experience on the road to Emmaus. Jesus was walking beside them and they didn't even realize it was him. We should listen for our ancestor now and learn from what he did for us. There was so much that he did. He was probably one of the most prolific activists of our time. I don't know, Greg. Can't think of anyone more prolific, maybe other than Du Bois. But he was everywhere at all times, for us, with us, not standing over us, but pushing us up. And so I'm thankful for that experience. And the last thing I'll say, I'm also thankful, and I say this to young people. Young people don't always get it as well, but I hope they do. Y'all, when you're a young person and someone believes in you, that's one of the greatest gifts ever. Don't ever take that for granted. And I was but a kid, 15, 16 years old. And Reverend Jackson let me know he believed in me. In fact, I knew before then because we first met on Sesame Street 5, 6 years old. I am somebody. Like, what does that mean? I am somebody. Is that who I am?
Yeah.
But when we met in face to face, he let me know that I really was, and he always reminded me of that. And that's a memory. We can talk about all the politics, all the marches, all the movements, but when we touch one another's lives personally, I think Maya Angelou said, it's not what people say or what they do, but how they make you feel.
Yes.
And he made all of us feel very, very special.
Dr. Carr, when we do talk about the historical and cultural legacy of Jesse Jackson, where do you see him stand out? Is it activist, politics, preacher, moral voice? What?
Well, I think he defines for a couple of generations the possibilities and the limitations of Black freedom struggle in the United States. Not to mention globally, but by possibilities, I mean, the phrase that was always used to describe Duke Ellington's work, beyond category. Jesse Jackson can't be put in one category. He's clearly, and again, my condolences as well, Mark. I said, I don't know how close you all were, but like you, a man of faith, a man of the spirit, an expansive mind. For me, Jesse Jackson used politics as a means to an end, as a delivery system. He had a political gift. He's clearly the times that I was around Jesse Jackson, just extemporaneously listening to him work through ideas and workshop tactics. His genius was really beyond my capacity to put words to. I mean, he could assess a situation very, very incisive. So there's that dimension. I think it's beyond category, but I think the limits of freedom struggles. If I had to give him one descriptor, I would say that Jackson is the bridge. He's the bridge from the generations that killed apartheid in this country to the generations that came after.
Right.
Those generations have not acknowledged, paid homage, and will not, I think, in the coming days, do it in a way consistent with those who struggled with him, like Mark and I in the same generation. Those who were his comrades, and there are fewer and fewer who are not ancestors now. But I think how we reflect on his life will measure our own understanding and our own ignorance about the last 4 generations of politics in the United States. I was 19 when I first saw Jesse Jackson. He was running for president, and he came to Nashville. He was at Vanderbilt. It was 1984. We went over to see the Reverend, and he said, if the other candidates had my budget, they could not compete. And if I had their budget, they could not compete. And then there was a pause, and this roar went up from the crowd. It was so clear he was head and shoulders above everybody else in the race. If Jesse Jackson were a white man, he'd have been 2-time president of the United States. It wouldn't even have been close. John Kennedy can't touch Jesse Jackson in terms of political gifts and instincts and capacity. And when you layer that through his gift of speech, there's nobody like him, and perhaps there won't be anybody like him anytime soon.
It's so fascinating to me as we looked at some of the reporting that came out earlier today and put so much into context where no political figure has registered more people to vote than Jesse Jackson. And I think for me as a very, very young man in college, that was the thing, Reverend Thompson, that really struck me. That, yeah, well, I come from a family of voters, but
Right.
there were so many people. I mean, we, when you got your driver's license at 16, my family was already talking to me about, okay, you got 2 more years. On your birthday or that week, you will register to vote. But there were so many people who were not of that ilk, and to register millions to vote and to be inclusive of everyone, Reverend Thompson, black and white and brown and yellow and gay and straight and young and old and all of these things. As Dr. Carr just said, we have not seen, nor will we ever likely see someone like him again.
That's true. No one has registered more voters than he did. No one defined that as the paramount strategy in an electoral process. What is shameful is that now that the consultant class has taken over the Democratic Party and shunned the Jesse Jackson strategy. And folks, it's very, very simple. Anybody on the sound of our office, you running for office?
That's right.
This is the strategy. You look at past elections and you look at the margins of victory, and you compare that figure to the number of unregistered voters, registered voters, and low voters, and voters who registered who don't turn out. And then what Reverend Jackson would say is go and make sure people are registered, register that difference in number. Make sure those who haven't been showing up are re-registered, make sure they're current, because we live in a moment of purging and suppression and caging. It's almost as if even in 2024, we forgot there was such a thing as voter suppression. But doing that Jesse Jackson strategy required, I want everybody to understand this, Greg knows this well, required funding of organizations to do just that, to make sure people weren't purged, to make sure that new voters were registered, even coming out of high school at 18 years old. And the Democratic Party decided, well, we're not going to spend that kind of money. We're not going to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. You see, why would you not want to do that? There are those, not just Republicans, who don't want to see as many people vote as possible. That's right. And so we need to defend his memory and carry on what he started, continue the legacy by going back to that. I even see some black folk now. I'm running for office. So what's your plan? And then when I describe what I just described you, I'm speaking Chinese. This is math, y'all. It's really not emotion. And it's not just money. It's math. Jesse Jackson gave us a tried and true and timeless political science is the word, not political arts. Right. And who did he learn that from but Dr. Ron Walters, right there of Howard University? That's the greatest political mind since Du Bois. And so this was the mathematical equation. Register or re-register the difference in what lost that election the last time around, whoever that candidate was. Real simple. And so that was the difference. That's why he registered so many voters, because he didn't just count on the people who are already registered. I need 10,000 more voters. Let me go and register those as new. And when you register as a candidate, new voters, they're likely to vote for you.
Yeah. Reverend Thompson, you made some fantastic points, and I really want to thank you, first of all, for your time. Certainly our thoughts are not only with the Jackson family, but also with you. When we talk about the loss of your dear friend Reverend Jackson, but I want to give you just 30 more seconds to just share some final thoughts about Reverend Jackson.
Well, thank you for this. He was with us at Howard University during the last student protest at the Blackburn Center, as a matter of fact. Joe Leonard was there with us. We will miss him. We must go forward in his memory. This is a very personal task for me. But we all have to be reminded of his words. He always talked about when morning comes, it's morning
Yes.
time. And this morning he woke up and saw the Black Christ face to face. We must live out his legacy, that one fine morning we too may all see Reverend Jackson again.
Reverend Mark Thompson, thank you so much. I really appreciate your input for this important conversation. We need to take a break, but when we come back, we will continue our conversation about the life and legacy of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. We'll be back on Sirius XM, channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about the life and legacy of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson.
You see Jesse Jackson. When my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it.
We continue with Dr. Greg Carr, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Howard University, and Dr. Joe Leonard. Dr. Leonard is the Assistant Vice President for External Affairs at Howard University. Dr. Leonard, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you, Harold. Sure
thing. Talk to me about your relationship with Reverend Jackson. It is a long one. It is a very intimate and intellectual relationship.
Reverend, I worked as Reverend's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief from 2000 to 2005. I say that even though I was working with him in 1999. At 2005 when I came on payroll, but I don't know how to describe it. I would describe it as, I remember asking him one day, Reverend, why would you see in me to hire me? And he said, number one, Joe, to be honest with you, there wasn't a long line to work for Dr. King. There's not really a long line to work for me, but what I look for is somebody who has a sermon in their pocket, in their back pocket, and they just got to get it out, and they want to get it out and help people. He took that push very seriously. People united to serve humanity, and that's what that sermon. He wanted to hear people not talking about their own accolades. He wanted that sermon to be able to convince people to be able, to help people. And it is, working with him that long, it changes the course of your life. I got to meet really early on the Greg Carrs of the world, Dean Richardson. I'm talking about just at Howard, Ron Walters. Come on now. This is just at Howard, just really early on, and spend the next 25 years like serving with them, serving humanity with them. And it's just I don't know how to, he lit, I tell students all the time when they come to Howard, find your tribe. You got to find your tribe, then you'll feel, you'll make it. Find your tribe. And he would convene the tribe all the time. And he would, all over the world. I was able to, James, even though I was the DC Bureau Chief, James ran the International Bureau within the DC office. We went all over the world. And I always say this, and I was listening to the commentary 4 or 5 o'clock this morning, and people were really kind of saying that he was a black leader, and he was. But Reverend, I've heard him say that you're putting me in a small box. I'm a leader. I lead everyone. When I went to Syria, when I went to Iraq, when I went to Cuba, when I went to Serbia. He was dealing with those presidents of those countries like a world leader. It's only here in the United States that we would call him a black leader. When he went to Libya on behalf of the British citizens that were being held hostage, they appealed to him as a world leader. And that was something like it's like I can lead black people. I can lead everybody else too. So that's why he was one of the first people to include LGBTQ rights in his campaign. That's why we were marching on behalf of women getting admitted into Augusta at the Masters. You know, won. He's leading it with Pat Ireland and Kim Gandy, two former national presidents of now. That's why when the culinary workers need somebody in Vegas, he is there. He's leading everyone. But one of the things that would occur is if he's leading black people, the cameras will show up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make such a really important point. I mean, everywhere he was, the cameras were there. Dr. Card, and I don't want this to be missed for those for whom Jesse Jackson is just a name in the history books. For those who are listening to this, who never met him, who never saw him, who only saw him during the last years of his life, kind of give me the cliff notes from we know he was born in Greenville, South Carolina. He went to an HBCU, but he was young. He was full of vigor. Some would say brash. Some would say too brash. But just kind of talk to us about the evolution of his tutelage under Dr. King and his leadership.
I mean, in a nutshell, and we've heard it. We've heard it from Mark. We're hearing it from Joe. I think the story of Jesse Jackson is the story of black institutions, whether it be the black family. You know, people very quickly, the press, particularly the white press, is going to talk about his mother was teenage mother, grandmother. But no, a community raised Jesse Lewis Jackson, including his stepfather, so-called stepfather, took the man's name. The black church, as you say, North Carolina A&T, shout out to the Aggies, HBCUs, which he comes to after, of course, going to University of Illinois for a minute, which was going to limit his potential on the field. He said, no, I'm going to be a quarterback. And so he ends up student body president and on the football team, leading the football team at A&T. His classmates, his colleagues, his comrades, that first protest action in 1960, which, launches him into the activism. And then finally, in terms of that watershed moment, of course, Martin King, in Selma, Alabama, where a young man with ego and talent and ambition, would you say, Joe, wasn't no line to work with Dr. King. So people have to understand that Jesse Jackson represents black genius. He represents genius, period, as you say, Joe. And that genius is shaped by black institutions. So when I think of Jesse Jackson, I'm not joking. I'm just thinking, who was going to preach his funeral? Because he preached everybody else's. Mm-hmm. Jackie Robinson, man. I mean, this man. And when he stood at a pulpit, when Jesse Jackson preached Jackie Robinson's funeral and said, Jackie has stolen home, where referees are not allowed. It was the turn of Jesse Jackson never appeared anywhere without reminding everyone that he was the product of community. In that second address, and Joe, you remember this, brother, because we was all fighting with both fists. We was headed to Atlanta to tear up the Democratic Party, brother. Mm-hmm. We was going to tear up the Democratic Party. And Jesse, in a shrewd move, listen, man, no Jesse Jackson, and Joe, you made this point earlier today. We were talking, man, without not just Brian Walters, but the HBCU brain trust, the black professorate. Without that crew, you don't have a Doug Wilder, governor of Virginia. You don't have a David Dinkins, mayor of New York. You don't have all those black elected officials because of all those people that y'all registered and recruited all these teenagers like I was when I was in Nashville and fired our imagination. So we was going to go tear up the Democratic Party. And we didn't even realize that Jackson in seating everybody from Ron Brown and Donna Brazile to everybody, basically laid the foundation for a Bill Clinton presidency, much less a Barack Obama. And when y'all renegotiated those delegates so they would be proportional in a primary rather than winner take all, it transformed the whole possibility of the Democratic Party. And you know what stopped it? Joe Biden, Bill Clinton. They determined that even when they went to Illinois, Jesse had won Michigan. He was on his way to winning in Super Tuesday. They coaxed Paul Simon back into the race in Illinois to stop Jesse Jackson from winning the state of Illinois. Jesse could have been the nominee in 88. Who knows what would have happened in the general election? But what I'm saying is the story of Jesse Jackson is also the story of the limitations of democracy in the United States. Race is so powerful a factor that the Democratic Party would rather kill itself, would rather immolate itself. And I don't mean just by winning or losing elections. I mean that the winners of the Democratic Party in national elections since Jesse Jackson have become perhaps closer to what the Republican Party was in the 1960s and 70s, because they could not face the possibility of a multiracial democracy in this country. So I think the story of Jesse Jackson is really the acid test to American democracy, brother. To me, that's really the story of Jesse Jackson.
Dr. Leonard, one of the things that I also remember as a very, very, very young reporter, and I'm going to take both of you all back for this one, I was 22 years old. I was working at WHUR the very first time as a reporter. This was during the 1988 campaign. And as he often did when he came to DC, he stayed at the old Howard Inn right there on Georgia Avenue, where, for those of you who may not be familiar, that's where that Starbucks is, right across the street from, and a little down the street from where the McDonald's is. And I was just a kid, and I remember interviewing him and doing my best not to be in awe. And that was the second time, I believe, that I had interviewed him. But one of the things that always got to me was he was always in town to make a speech, and when I was trying to interview him, he would always give me the speech. No matter what I asked him. But even with that said, Dr. Leonard, what was he like when the cameras were not there? When you were sitting around strategizing or just talking about the day's events?
There was fun involved, but there was a lot of work. And I say that because, an average day is to go to 3 cities. That's a very average day. Or if you're in the same city, if you're in Chicago, you're doing 5 events. I remember he would work himself into exhaustion, and you would get like walking pneumonia, and he'd have to go to a hospital. Of course, he loved Howard University Hospital. He'd always go to Howard University Hospital, stay for about a week, get back up, and he's on the grind again. But there are these moments of levity, and there were a lot. And Greg, you can talk to Gary Flowers. There were these just hilarious moments. But it was, I hesitate to tell you one of those moments, but I remember, I cannot remember which Final Four it was, but I do remember Cincinnati was in it. And we were picketing outside, and we had our signs, and we were picketing. And we were picketing because none of the African-American players had graduated in 5 years from any of the 4 teams. So Reverend is saying, look, you got this big March Madness brand. Not trying to talk about March Madness, but, I hope I'm making my point on Reverend Jackson's legacy. And we were picketing, and he told me to get the signs, let's put them in this van. I put them in the van. I came back, and he was like, all right, let's go. And like, where are we going, Reverend? we going to the game. We walked in there without any tickets. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of levity, a lot of moments similar to that. But you know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of you know, and I know, Greg, you remember John Mitchell. It was a lot of death threats. You know, I love the fact that people will call Reverend in the town, because he was a homeboy to every village or hamlet that had folks in it. So they would call him in. People would act like Reverend's going there. No, they're calling him because he's been there so many times that he's one of them, and he knows that they'll protect his interests. Earlier today, I was listening to some commentary on Reverend was a brash young man and brash this. If you listen to Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without demand. Never has, never will." The only way you can fight power is to be brash, or you automatically concede.
That's right.
I hope I'm making sense. You know what I mean? You automatically, so that brashness, that audaciousness, that confidence, you know, is absolutely needed to be able to do what he's done for all of these years. And it's just powerful. One of the things that I know that he would say, and I think it's the 84 campaign, it's one of them. I cannot remember, it's the end of the 84. I think it's 84, not 88. When he talks about all things are possible, that confidence, that brashness, you have to feel all things are possible. It's also written on the end of the 1972 Gary Convention, you know, of which, you know, Reverend Jackson is not supposed to be the candidate who makes the most audacious run. He's supposed to be the candidate that creates his own Black political party. And that shows his nimblism and his and working with the Ron Walters of the world, and ended up being able to mold a political party that truly supports Medicare, Medicaid. You remember when they were working on with Representative Conyers' motor voter, or strengthening the Voting Rights Act of 65, or strengthening SNAP benefits, WIC, LAHEEB, you know, who was doing all of this all the time? Who cared about the less lost and least of these, the least of us? He certainly did.
And that's what I want to ask you about this. And before you came on, I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, and I don't want people to lose sight of one of the things that, as not just as a leader, but as a political candidate, that we had not really seen much of before 1984, and quite honestly, maybe with the exception of President Obama, we'll never see again, how inclusive his movement was, Dr. Leonard. When we talk about Rainbow Coalition, this was a lottie-dottie and everybody there. This was the I in before DEI. About no one left behind, everybody included, you know, Black, white, you know, gay, straight, brown, yellow, immigrants, native born. What was it like to be in the space of those kinds of conversations and philosophies?
It's funny, and I know Dr. Carr knows this. If you go to Reverend's office in Chicago, he has two pictures behind him. One is Dr. King, and one is Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez was actually had a profound impact on his life, because he knew him longer than actually Dr. King. So I really believe that the farm worker movement, the LGBTQ movement, um, uh, the women's rights and IRA, ERA movement. All of those things really did matter to him. Organizing farmers in Iowa, organizing coal workers in West Virginia. You know, if they would listen and they cared about their community, he cared about policies in order to make people better. Whatever the policy was, he hit every, I want to say he went to every, I'm saying, what's this called? Farm aid event until 2000. And he missed it in 2000. And it was in West Virginia that year. And because he was on the campaign trail, but he wanted to make that farm aid event. And that was the first year that West Virginia went Republican. And he always thought that, dang, I should have gone to West Virginia. I should have been able to talk to the coal miners and the people in West Virginia. That I always thought he modeled, and this is pure supposition, that he modeled it on the civil rights movement. There were gay brothers and sisters and white brothers and sisters and Hispanic brothers and sisters all fighting in sit-ins and in the freedom rides. And he kind of modeled it on that, I've always thought, and replicated it. Once people went to the different places, the anti-war movement, you know, and all their different places, women's rights, he was trying to coalesce again and bring it together. And I've always thought that. And you're right, our leadership had all of those elements in different areas of the country. And it's the closest thing that we've had since then, when you really think about it. It's the closest thing we've had since then.
Dr. Carr, what do you believe is the most misunderstood about Jesse Jackson?
I think it's already been said. Jackson's gifts were nurtured they emerged out of a Black foundation. And I don't mean just a Black American foundation, very African, communal, everything from the speech and the music to the tapping into deep spirituality. So there's that. But I think, as we've heard over and over again, and Joe is laying it out, he just laid it out. Jesse Jackson was to borrow from the description of Paul Robeson, Jesse Jackson was a citizen of the world. And I think that is deeply misunderstood. There's going to be a lot of conversations about the diplomacy and bringing people back to the United States. But the thing that will be missed, I think, Joe, you just said it, brother. Dr. Leonard just said it. I mean, when you're out there with the migrant workers and you with the coal miners, you can't fake that. I mean, you certainly can. You can cosplay it. But Jackson believed it. And more importantly, the people who he was in community with believed it. That's the type of solidarity politics that is transformative. And I think you're absolutely right, Doc. I mean, he leveraged the strength of the civil rights movement, the long Black freedom movement, which has always been Black at its foundation, at its base, but ultimately has been inviting to everyone who shares a commitment to our common humanity. And the people he beat back, the ideologies he beat back, he did not beat back by himself. He beat back as a result of the people he surrounded himself with and who surrounded him. So I think the most misunderstood thing that we're going to see over and over again, which is, again, why I'm glad we have the Daily Drum, we have Black media to have these conversations for the world. The thing that will be misunderstood by Jesse Jackson, about Jesse Jackson, is that somehow he was just a Black leader. And I would say this in terms of even comparing him to someone like Barack Obama. It's not an easy comparison. It's not an easy comparison. I mean, you know, I think it will be a closer comparison, frankly, compare Bernie Sanders, who worked with the Rainbow Coalition, to Jesse Jackson than Barack Obama. And I think that Obama made a political choice to kind of create some space between he and Jesse Jackson. And I respect that. I understand that politically. And I also understand that that too is a referendum on the limits of the possibility of American electoral politics. Because anytime you turn away from that type of commitment to our common humanity in favor of winning some elections and triangulating and really advancing what amounts to be really a neoliberal agenda, you have in many ways rejected what Jesse Jackson stood for and the things that he stood for as beautifully informed by his being as a black man, as an African man, as a man of a person of African descent, are really a universal. Those are universal commitments, and they're universal truths, and they're universal grounding foundational politics. And Jesse Jackson drew a bright line as far as I'm concerned. Now, I mean, do we all see? Did you see what the current occupant of what's left of public housing at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue said? You know, Trump issued a statement, and I'm saying therein lies the complicated politics of a Jesse Jackson, his Wall Street project, all that stuff. Donald Trump is in the room, but Jesse ain't sacrificed his principles. I mean, I think that's part of the genius of him. You know what I mean? I
was hoping that we were going to get through this conversation without
it's important,
president, but you make an excellent point.
Who would you trust to be in the room with a guy like that you would say, if he's in that room, he's not going to sell us out? That's why we didn't, when he released all those delegates, Joe, in Atlanta in the 88 after convention, we was mad, but we said, but it's Jesse. He must have a plan. And then you look up and it's Clinton. I'm saying, I can't, Joe, I don't know. Who can we trust now to go in a room and say, this guy's going to sell us out? You never thought Jesse was going in the room to sell us out. Even if you questioned the tactic, you figured, wait a minute, it's Jesse though. You know what I mean? I just don't know.
Dr. Leonard, I've got about 30 seconds for you before I wrap up this conversation. What do you believe America would have looked like under the leadership of a president, Jesse Jackson?
That's hard to say. I think he would have fought ardently on behalf of the people who he I think he would have fought ardently on the people that the I Am Somebody was meant for. I think he would have been extraordinary in geopolitical matters. But I think that it would have been the tripling of the Great Society, if that makes any sense. I absolutely believe that he would have doubled down on a lot of those policy decisions. One of the things that you have to understand about Reverend Jackson is there have been 250 years of slavery in this country, 100 years of segregation. So when he started talking about I am somebody, he's talking to people who've spent 350 years being told they are nothing. That soundbite was meaningful, and he was speaking to his own condition. So with some of that, with the background and that understanding, I think that he would have put all of his effort again into the least, less, and loss of us. And there's and I mean of every single race, sexual orientation in this country.
That's a good place to end this conversation. Dr. Joe Leonard, Dr. Greg Carr, thank you so much. We also want to thank Reverend Mark Thompson for his contribution. We are out of time. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, February 17th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.
Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you are qualified, and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.